Okay, we're live. All right, welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Tech Talk Q&A. Normally I do these things without like a nice background and everything, but Tone convinced me to use my green screen, and I'm trying to have slightly higher production value for the show. Hopefully that's something that you guys appreciate. At some point, I'll figure out how to, simulcast on Periscope so people on Twitter can get it as well instead of having to click through and all that. But yeah, I'm planning to up the production value at least a little bit. Oh, forgot about my second like here. But yeah, this is a show every week where I go through the news of the week in Bitcoin from a technical perspective and tell you what's going on. And hopefully that's something that you can use. That's something that you can understand and, level up a little bit in your technical knowledge of Bitcoin. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Let's take a look at some of the stories that I covered in my newsletter. As always, Bitcoin Tech Talk goes out every morning at 9 a.m., every Monday morning at 9 a.m., and it's something that I write over the weekend, and it's all the news from the previous week. So this week's lead story is Miniscript and its importance, Bitcoin Tech Talk, issue number 188. Oh, by the way, I think you guys can see the little tip jar and the YouTube number. Hopefully that's something that that's the jar. I can move that around for some reason, but the viewer count isn't showing. So not sure why that doesn't work, but at some point I'll figure it out. All right, so sub Timmy, where's Joan? That's funny. Okay, all right, so let's talk about Script, because Script is the smart contract language behind Bitcoin. A lot of people don't know this because they are not familiar with how Bitcoin works. But Bitcoin has had from its inception a smart contract language called Script, and it's purposefully not Turing complete. And the idea behind it is so that you can program the smart contract and know exactly what the outcomes will be. If you have loops, if it's Turing complete, it becomes very hard to analyze. So Satoshi purposefully made Script not Turing complete. Anyway, the language is similar to Forth, and if you're not familiar with Forth, it's like a stack-based language, and that's how Script works. I teach this in my book. I've taught this in my seminar. So if you want to know more about the actual details, you can go look at those resources. Anyway, it's a lot of capabilities that Script has. There's a lot of what we would call opcodes in there. But most of it turns out, doesn't get used. Vast majority of the contracts or smart contracts on the network are fairly simple. It's pay to a single key. That's by far the most popular, which is pay to pub key hash. These are addresses that start with a 1. Pay to witness pub key hash, BC1, and it's a certain number of characters. Or pay to script hash, pay to witness pub key hash, which is wrapping that up. But there's also multi-sig, which is fairly popular in certain cases, and also hash time lock contracts, which are for Lightning. And you need certain kinds of script for that. But most of the others, those only require a certain small number of opcodes. Vast majority of the opcodes or the capabilities within Script aren't used at all. And that ends up being kind of like a tax on the Bitcoin network because, the developers have to make sure they test it even though it doesn't get used. And stuff that doesn't get used or tested that often doesn't tend to work that well. And it gets kind of messy, right? Like there are stuff like op2 dupe and op swap and things like that, which aren't normally found in the Bitcoin smart contracts that you see on the network. So so the question is, why is it this way? Well, some of them really aren't that interesting. Others are interesting. Op check lock time verify is very interesting. But the fact of the matter is that it's very hard to reason about. Most of the smart contracts have a particular form. You want to know the conditions under which it will get unlocked. But it's a it's a very peculiar language. Forth is, in order to understand what the actual thing behind it is. It's hard to understand what it is that will unlock a particular smart contract. So that means that we need a better way to reason about script and to figure out what will actually unlock it. And this is where Miniscript comes in. And if you don't know about Miniscript, it's basically a subscript, a subset of script that Peter Woola has just sort of put into another form as a way to more easily reason about it. So, for example, here's sort of like a smart contract that you can create. And is basically two conditions. So you need one public key and one of these conditions or public key, one of these two conditions to be met, pub key B or pub key C, and it's older than 1,000. So some time has passed, you get pub key C or pub key B in addition to pub key A. So that's a lot easier to know what you need. You need pub key A and B or C. If you have B, you don't need to wait. If you have C, you need to wait. That's it. Those are the, that's a lot easier to reason about. And the nice thing about Miniscript is that you can compile it to script, essentially. And this is the resulting script. And these are the opcodes that you can enter into a smart contract. And that's that ends up being the same thing as this sort of policy language. Anyway, there's a magical Bitcoin. I'm not sure who that is, but they've created a policy compiler and a playground for Miniscript, which is essential for anyone that's exploring Miniscript and figuring out what to do with the policy. And you can see the policy here, and you can compile it and come up with various things. So I don't really have a long read today, but we'll play with that later. All right, Tobias Huber has published a paper about Bitcoin bubbles as innovation accelerator. So this is written by Tobias Huber with respect to Bitcoin and what it does. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Not sure if it'll show. Yeah, so here's the actual paper that you can take a look at. But it has a lot of interesting information about Bitcoin, how it interacts, sort of like the technological innovation and the economic aspect, sort of both are, work together for innovation acceleration. Here's another story that I was a little bit surprised by. I talked about this a little bit on Tone Show, but this is Cobra Bitcoin opening an issue on the Bitcoin.org GitHub, saying that he's going to essentially resign, or he's going to step away from management of the Bitcoin.org domain. Now, Cobra was handed the Bitcoin.org domain when Satoshi disappeared, and he's been taking care of it ever since. So it's been like 10 years since Cobra has been working on this. Now, he's wondering, who am I going to hand this off with? Jonathan Corrigan suggested Bitcoin Optech. Cobra didn't like it because they've smeared Bitcoin.org in the past. David Harding suggests Will Binns and Savon, who's I think Craig Watkins. And Cobra was saying, hey, those are the people that I had in mind. So the Bitcoin.org domain will be transferred to somebody that understands what's going on. And this is, of course, the website that GitHub points to. And, it has a lot of amazing resources, especially with respect to the Bitcoin Wiki. Well, not the Bitcoin Wiki, the What are the developer documentation, which is extensive and has, you know, really, really good information. I mean, this is superb stuff. So congrats to, you know, Cobra, or I thank Cobra for his service for the past 10 years. It's not over yet, but obviously he's done a very good job. By the way, if you guys are new here, I would really appreciate subscribe and a like for the video so more people can find stuff like this. All right, Coinmetrics has some relevant statistics from the last couple of months, and this is, you know, I mean, they compile lots of statistics. That's their thing, Coinmetrics, and they talk about a lot of the money flowing into stable coins and you know, sort of what's going on there. Paxos seems to be getting a lot more popular more recently. USDC not as much. DAI getting very unpopular. There's also various networks, and you know, the hash rate. The Bitcoin supply held by exchanges. This was interesting because they almost all seem to be heading downward. So people aren't trusting exchanges quite as much anymore. And they're choosing to hold their own coins. Yeah, so percentage price change, you know, some other insights. So very good article. You know, it looks like more people are holding their own keys, which is very good. Let's take a look at some Lightning stuff. So Lightning Labs has an upgrade to Loop, and if you don't know what Loop is, it's basically a way to fund your channels again after you've more or less depleted them on chain, and that's called a submarine swap. So you pay somebody to refill your Lightning channel, for example, or to take money out of a Lightning channel if you're the one getting paid, and that's great, and it works for a single channel. What Lightning Labs has done is they've combined this with multi-path payments to make it so that you can fill multiple channels with a single on-chain transaction, fill or withdraw from. So if you're a merchant and you have lots of inbound liquidity that or inbound payments that you want to get on chain, what multi-loop does is it makes them all very easily liquid. So if you have 100 channels open and you want to essentially take a lot of the money out, you only need one transaction in order to do that, and you just refill them, which means that the Lightning channels can stay open a lot longer and be useful for far longer. Similar thing if you're refilling them, or if you're the one spending and you have like 100 channels, you can fill all of them with a single one. This is a very important thing. I think it makes Lightning a lot more usable. It makes it scale a lot better because a single payment can fund lots and lots of transaction or channels. And what would be really interesting is if there were a service like, well, I mean, I guess Loop already does this, is they fill lots and lots of channels with a single payment or withdrawal, and you can do this like once a day and just fill all of them, which would be really interesting as a way to continue the growth of the Lightning Network. All right, so this is an interesting pull request on Bitcoin Core, introducing AltNet, a pluggable framework for alternative transport. So Lightning itself is a network, and everyone has a public key, and you can you know, transfer data between Lightning nodes. What this pull request does is it transfers Bitcoin data over the Lightning network. So instead of using the normal network transport using TCP/IP, you're using the Lightning network you know, communication channels to transfer Bitcoin data. So it's kind of like Inception. It's Lightning riding on top of Bitcoin, but giving Bitcoin data being transferred over Lightning. It's kind of crazy, but you can do stuff like this because Lightning itself is its own network, and we've seen applications like encrypted chat, end-to-end encrypted chat over Lightning and things like that. So in a sense, Lightning Network is starting to become more like what the internet was first designed to be. Largely right now, it's mostly sort of a server-client configuration where everybody gets data from Facebook or Google or something like that. But initially, it was supposed to be completely peer-to-peer. So you can get data from one peer and another, and it was supposed to be sort of very decentralized in that way. Lightning, I think, is starting to create this infrastructure that's very much of that spirit, of that initial internet decentralized network that everyone dreamed of back in the 80s, but didn't quite come into fruition. It's a lot more walled gardens and centralized places now. So that's very exciting. All right, Alan Farrington has a nice review of what it means, what the halving means from what he calls the spiritual perspective. It's not an article I expected to read, honestly, but it's an interesting way of it's an interesting perspective on Bitcoin itself. So essentially, the halving happened with going from 12.5 to 6.25. But what's interesting is that the halving was not just the mining of the 630,000th block. It was a social event, perhaps unlike any other in history, and perhaps even never to be repeated. Previous halvings were celebrated in bars, beaches, and barbecues, but given the lockdown, the celebrations were migrated. Many thought this a shame, that wasn't the right one. But spiritually, the importance of the universality really cannot be overstated. The Bitcoin halving happened at the same time for everybody because the Bitcoin protocol is the same for everybody. In other words, it's a constant in the midst of this uncertainty, and that's in itself very interesting. It has this sort of metaphysical reality to it that's separate from something like pretty much everything else, which has sort of a very physical component. And that's the argument here, is that Bitcoin really is metaphysical, and being metaphysical, it has a spiritual significance. This thing in the block 629999, Fed's plan far exceeds 2008 rescue. So it's a way of rebelling in the metaphysical realm, and I think it can be fairly argued that is in itself the spiritual realm as well. All right, Reddit has launched an ERC20 token. These are sort of community points, and you can see they explain what it is sort of in this very cartoony, simplistic way. Essentially, it looks like some sort of a money grab, and I think this spells a very bad turn for Reddit. They are having a horrible time monetizing the traffic that they're getting. They're like the number 7 website in the world, and yet they can't make money, which is kind of strange. Which is why they're going towards the altcoin route, and apparently they did something similar in ETHTrader, and that caused them to split. I mean, honestly, this doesn't bode well for Reddit as a website. I think the VC investment that's been put in is demanding some sort of a return, but I don't know if they can really monetize their users that well. Generally, the people in these subreddits are very passionate about that particular topic, but not isn't willing to necessarily pay Reddit much money for it. So I think Reddit works fine as a much smaller website. If it were just entirely text-based, I don't think it would be that much data, to be honest. And you can probably serve off of it and have run the website reasonably without having to monetize every single user. But that's yeah. I mean, it seems headed towards some sort of VC-backed explosion of something or other. I suspect it'll end in a lot of drama and tears. All right, let's talk about the case for Bitcoin from a technical perspective. So this is not necessarily an argument that I've really heard before, so I included it for that reason. So Bitcoin maximalism is a term from Vitalik, and what he argues in this article is that Bitcoin is simply the best platform to build on. Everybody else is basically a joke, and they're constantly changing things. The technology is much weaker. It hasn't been battle tested. It's interesting that he says all coins original sin. So it's a way to reference the fact that they're all in it to make money, right? Like it's a way to print their own money, and as a result, it's reinventing the wheel is a bad idea. Therefore, Bitcoin is more superior because it's not trying to. It's already been invented, and it's a very solid platform. So that was interesting. Unchained Capital has an article on the resilience to exponential change, and this is an important concept if you're familiar with the entire idea of anti-fragility. Is that exponentials are very damaging to almost everything. But the thing about Bitcoin is that proof of work, despite all of the tech that continues to come into Bitcoin or to try to mine Bitcoin, all of that is sort of it doesn't matter because Bitcoin has this difficulty adjustment algorithm which adjusts for even exponential growth, which is actually really remarkable. And the fact that we're only about 6 months off the timeline of 10 minutes per block from its inception speaks to the efficacy of how well done this resilience to exponentials Bitcoin is. So great article on learning all of that. I did an epic live stream with Tone on Monday, which I think many of you guys watched. I also did the show debunking the claim that Adam is Satoshi. So let's at this time go to my Twitter feed and I'll explain some of my tweets. 171,000 followers, kind of crazy. I never thought that I would get to numbers that huge, but sometimes that's how it is. All right. If you got into Bitcoin before 7-digit blocks, you're still early. By that, I mean that if you got in before block 1 million, you're early. The next halving is at 840,000, and the halving after that is 1,050,000. So you got like 2 more halvings to go before I would consider you like, mid-tier. You're still early at this point. Popular fiction, external threats that come out of nowhere and heroes restoring things back to order, suggesting the problem is out there. Reality. Government policies that create incentives that enslave ordinary people, the problem is within. Hollywood is not reality. And I wrote this because I realized like so much of our mental model is influenced honestly by propaganda, and a lot of that propaganda comes through film and advertising and news and things like that. And almost always the archetype that we have in our minds is of somebody evil doing something evil. When in fact, most of the time, the evil that occurs is a result of bad incentives designed by monolithic organizations that have very little coordination, like the government. And that's where a lot of evil comes from. And that's where so much of the evil in the 20th century happened. So yeah, that's another one that I think would be interesting to ponder over. If everyone jumped off a bridge, would you? Bitcoin teaches you not to. With Bitcoin, you pretty much have to do your own research, and that's a good thing. That means that we become more resilient to propaganda and so on. And that was essentially my point. Money is property. The more secure that property is, the better the money is. Fiat is not very secure. Bitcoin is better. Fiat's not secure not because it's necessarily physical or the bank people can take it away, which is true. But the reason why it's not secure is because the supply can get inflated and your value can go down anytime, and that's the big thing that makes it not secure. Not so much with the US dollar right now, but certainly with other currencies, you're seeing a lot more of that. Unpopular opinion, what's happening now with the quarantine will be looked at very differently a year from now, and emotions toward it will swing 180, not unlike opinions on war. So, something that I pointed out in another podcast, but, the approval rating for George W. Bush right after the Iraq war started was like 80%. And that completely turned around within a couple of years. And I think, similar things will be happening with all these governors that are enabling these huge lockdowns and so on. They're going to be looked at very differently in due course. The dollar is a bad measuring stick in normal times. In times like these, it's atrocious. It's atrocious because they keep printing so much more of it. But more than that, there's some dollar contraction that's happening as well. So it's hard to tell, where things are going. Bitcoin price in a way is like one of the few ways in which you can know what's really going on with the dollar. I mean, I guess gold price does too. But yeah, it's kind of a crazy time right now. Broke, Bitcoin mining death spiral, woke, big quarantine economy death spiral. So yeah, Bitcoin mining death spiral didn't happen. If you look at the, actually we can look at it right now. If you look at the blocks that are coming in, it's there's a significant number of them. Within the past hour, I think there's been at least 10 blocks. So, I mean, it's not a death spiral at all. If anything, more people are mining. But on the other hand, the economy is flushing right down the toilet. It looks like, the economy is entering a death spiral very, very quickly. M2 money stock has increased 15% in the period between February 3rd and May 4th. That's 13 weeks. Annualized, that's 75%. It's insane how much money has been printed in 13 weeks. The M2 money supply increased by 15% in 13 weeks. So if you do that for a whole year, that would be 75% over a whole year, which is absolutely insane. But that's... we're on track to almost double our money supply in like a year and a half or something. So it's going to be kind of crazy. Learning how to use an external library is crucial for a developer. It teaches you how to read documentation, how to read code to understand undocumented options, how to munch data, how to verify what you wrote is correct, and how to get around limitations. For my money, I think this ends up being a large part of what developers do, whether it's an external library in the sense that if somebody in your company wrote it or some other vendor wrote it or whatever, you're going to have to hook into that stuff because you can't know everything. And there are very few programming things which end up, that you can just sort of purely code. So it's important to know how to do that stuff. Authorities demand to be treated as if they are competent, have integrity, know what's best for us, won't abuse their power, while treating us as if we are incompetent, have no integrity, have no idea what's best, will abuse any freedom. Opposite of the golden rule. And this is the real asymmetry between the governed and the governors. This is something that I think needs to be brought into light, is that governors or the authorities in charge, they often abuse their powers at the expense of us. You can't hurry Bitcoin, you can't slow Bitcoin, you can't pressure Bitcoin, you can't threaten Bitcoin. Bitcoin's imperviousness to individual desires is what gives Bitcoin its power. In other words, Bitcoin has this ability to create, to make it so that you can't threaten it or pressure it or make it do something. And this is why it's such a bad idea for the government to be in reactive mode with the money supply, because they will go in print, just like we're seeing now. And you can hurry, you can pressure, you can threaten the government, and they're responding exactly as we thought it would. You got into Bitcoin before J.K. Rowling? You're early. I found this interesting. Just what I can't believe she got started this convo 3 days ago, and it still keeps going. I did that show with Tone. Ultimately, loan payments in the current fiat system are funded by an even bigger loan. This is how money keeps expanding, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, but always expanding. In other words, fiat money is debt. Bitcoin is the alternative. And I mean, I think the most obvious way to think about it is you get a loan to buy a house. It's called a mortgage, and you get like a 30-year loan. And essentially, all of that money is printed out of thin air. And that's money that goes to whoever sold it. Maybe they're like they're paying off their mortgage, but it's generally there's money left over. So that's newly printed money. So the loan I got is closes the loan that the seller had, or if they had 100% equity in the house, that's all money that enters the economy, essentially. This is how money printing is done, and that was what I was pointing out. In 1971, banks officially became legally sanctioned money printers. Bankers became priests of fiat, charged with determining if someone was worthy of having money printed on their behalf. Opt out with Bitcoin. And this is something that I read in Ethics of Money Production, is that in 1971, when we went off the gold standard, essentially banks weren't really banks anymore. They're not securing anything. I mean, I guess they are in like your security box or whatever, but there's no gold there, right? Like, so what ended up happening is that their main business became being able to print more money, and every time they give you a loan, they're printing new money, and they've become essentially the arbiters of who deserves to have money printed and this is kind of messed up, because every time they print money, they're taking money from everybody else. All right, tips for noobs to Bitcoin. This is, I think, my most popular tweet this week. Holding is saving, trading is a skill. If you don't have an edge, don't. Spending is selling, which you'll regret. Coveting is the path to ruin. Waiting is winning. Learning will deepen your conviction. So I mean, holding is saving, guys, and that's a perfectly legitimate use. Trading is a skill, and if you don't have the skill, just don't trade. It's a bad idea. Spending is selling, so don't spend your Bitcoin because you'll generally regret it. Coveting is the path to ruin, and this is what happens to a lot of people, is that they get in and think they can make even better gains by going to altcoins that their friend made 5x on, or ICOs or something like that, or maybe leverage on BitMEX, whatever. That's how you go get wrecked. Waiting is winning. So I mean, because Bitcoin continues to go up over the long term, if you just wait, you'll do fine. Learning will deepen your conviction. All right, Sunday survey. What do you think that USD M2 money stock will be in December 31st, 2020? Most people seem to think in the $20 to $25 trillion range. It's currently 17.7. That's another 15% raise. Again, we had 15% raise in the last 13 weeks, so another just one more round of those will take us to over 20 trillion. Another round of that, I think, takes us to about 23, 24. So, that I guess a steady rate for the rest of the year is roughly in that range. There are plenty of people, though, that think that it'll go even higher than that. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness. The enemies we face are systematic. Bitcoin is the resistance against economic tyranny. And this is something that I've noticed, is that it's nobody is necessarily evil of those that are in authority. It's that as a system, they become evil because the incentives are bad, because they don't know everything and they're trying to centrally plan everything. And I think that's what this verse from Ephesians actually means, is that it becomes a struggle not against particular people. It becomes a struggle against this entity that's that's not flesh and blood, and that's it's a systematic thing and an organizational thing, and that's what we are fighting against with Bitcoin. All right, Mark Cuban's idiotic program of giving $1,000 check every 2 weeks of use it or lose it or something like that, and I predicted this what would happen. Everyone would buy stuff that they can sell later. So I mean, if you can buy gold with that $1,000, you would go buy gold. But that means that it would spike in price. So anything that has that will hold its value, all the assets will inflate in price. And this is exactly what happens in the fiat economy, is that everything has a store value premium because people will want a good store value. And what Mark Cuban's program is trying to do is to prevent you from storing value instead to get you to consume, but you can't force consumption. Services will issue you $1,000 receipt for some amount of money. So $20, I'll give you $1,000 receipt. Then you can keep the other $980 because you won't lose it anymore. Government bureaucracy. So because people will cheat in the first two ways, what the government bureaucracy will do is to determine where you can spend your $1,000. And of course, it will only be the things that they approve of or that they know of or are sufficiently big. So it'll favor billionaires like him, right? Like you can spend it at Walmart for groceries, right? Like or toilet paper or something like that. And it's this is the path of central planning like this. You can't force people to spend. This is the fallacy of Keynesianism, and this is why it doesn't work. Freedom is decentralized. Permission is centralized. It's binary, not a spectrum. And this is talking about centralization, decentralization. In a decentralized system, you have freedom. In a centralized system, you need permission, and it's binary. You either need permission or you don't. That was my point. All right, 3 days in, and she can already troll better than any F-head, Bcasher, or XRP zombie. She understands way more than she's claiming. It's probably further down the rabbit hole than any of us suspect. This is J.K. Rowling. She trolled everybody by saying she has significant Ethereum holdings when she was actually joking. So, yeah, I suspect JK's a lot smarter about this than she's letting on. She's kind of playing dumb a little bit, but yeah, she knows what's going on. She wants people to underestimate her for some reason. And this last tweet, seeds. So it's about a seedless avocado, and I wrote like, this is why you should treat fruits and vegetables with suspicion. They're almost all engineered through selective breeding or genetic engineering to be more addictive. That is, have more sugar or less seeds. If you want to know more about this, find out how watermelons are seedless. Like, where the heck do they get seedless watermelons? Yeah, you'll find out exactly how they selectively breed this stuff. It's a hybrid. If you want to know why bananas don't have seeds, you can find out how exactly they make those too. They literally don't have seeds. So what they do is they take the same banana tree and plant it in the ground, right? They're soft or brand planted in the ground. This is how you get genetically mutant creations continuing to, and it doesn't have to be genetically modified. Yes, meat also has some, selective breeding and stuff, but you can't make meat taste sweeter or, meat, like non-fertile or something like that. That doesn't work. And plus the life cycles of these things are at least a few years, whereas, with fruit and vegetables and things like that, you can do that every season essentially. All right, so anyway, that is about it for my tweets. Let's take a look at some of the Miniscript stuff. I already showed you how to compile it here. Here's the magical Bitcoin playground. So we can put in a policy. So thresh is you need like 2 of however many conditions. So PKA, PKB, PKC, PKD. So this is a simple 2 of 4 multisig, right? So, and this is what it comes down to, and you can see the policy. I think there's a way to, oops. Yeah, there we go. And you can create like a new one like this, and yeah, I don't think I want the or there. You can add this into here. Yeah, so you can have a key. Okay, and then you can have where are after, yeah, so we can, I think, yeah, so it'll give you the policy right here, which is kind of cool, and you can compile it, and yeah, for some reason it's, oh, I have to put this here. Yeah, there we go, and there you go, and you get the actual you know, Miniscript, and you can compile this in the Miniscript here. So you oh, whoops, that's not the right one. Here's the analyze a Miniscript, and you can analyze what it looks like. And the not sure what's going on, what's going wrong here, but you can put you can create your policy compiler, and you can take a look at like different examples like this. And you can delete that. You can put this here, and you can compile and get this. So it's pretty cool. You can have different keys. So this is 3 of 4. After a certain time, then 2 of 3 of these people can unlock. You know, it's just kind of a cool way to play with Miniscript and come up with the actual policies. And I wonder if we can take this and paste it into the policy here, and that should let us compile. Yeah, there we go. And then you can get the actual you know, script language. This would be the smart contract that you can use you know, on the Bitcoin network. So I mean, this is the future of Bitcoin, is using something like this so that we can have more smart contracts that are easy to reason about. Anyway, let's see if there are any questions in the chat. All right, let's see. If paper money is not backed by anything apart from people's trust, what is the problem in printing more over time? Well, hyperinflation is the big danger of paper money. But yeah, I mean, with the US dollar, I don't think that's really going to be a problem at least not yet. It's the other currencies that will probably hyperinflate first. Okay, I think that's about it. As usual, my sign off is Fiat delenda est. This song is done.